This is the Realty Classroom Podcast, episode number 211. What should you micromanage? Well, it's not the people. Are you a real estate agent who wants to build your job into a business without sacrificing your lifestyle? But you just can't seem to find the right plan or any plan to help you get there? Well, then, hey, you're definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Realty Classroom and the host of this podcast. Now, to help you take immediate action to get started in the right or better direction, I've created a free jumpstart plan for you that's waiting at freeagentgift.com. I know you all want to run to the tactics. What lead gen? What script? What strategy? I'm just telling you, the tactics will fall into place so much better if you start with a strategic outlook on the business as a whole. I still do this to this very day. So when I run these podcasts, I'm telling you my best tips for free. And if you need validation, because this is my coaching business, go over to thegriffin.co, thegriffin.co, and look at the featured listings. Those are my listings. Those are the luxury listings I get with these very techniques and tactics that I give away on the podcast. Please believe, he said. All right, let's get started. What should you micromanage? And it's not the people. Now, this has taken me a long time to try to figure this all out about systems and people. And somewhere behind me, if you're watching the video version of the podcast, Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, is back there. And that I got introduced to that book by my original mentor in real estate, and I knew that guy was successful because of systems. And previous to that, I had spent time in the investment banking business and the venture capital business, and I had looked at a lot of companies, and I knew the most successful ones ran off of systems. So I'm going to start by just giving you a little teaser before I get into the bullet points of the podcast here today, that systems really are going to be a key theme here. So pay close attention. The first point, though, is micromanagement has this really negative connotation. And it starts by the fact that we become micromanagers because as an individual agent, we micromanage ourselves. That's what we do, right? So in other words, think about micromanaging something. It's this ominous over the back of your shoulder, looking down at what you're doing, say, hey, don't do this, do that. Well, we do that to ourselves. I mean, when I started to outline this podcast here, I started thinking to myself, well, didn't I do that to myself? Well, did you make your phone calls today? Did you put everything in the wire rack and split them up from leads to prospects to clients? And what about that closing? And did you call this guy? I mean, that is essentially micromanaging all the little tactical things that we have to do in the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, right? So that's what we do. So what happens is we build this incredibly bad habit of micromanaging ourselves. Now, the next point there is, so now all of a sudden we're feeling henpecked by ourselves. And so here we are, and we're in this frazzled state. I know that because I got very frazzled myself every time my phone rang because I knew it was, oh my gosh, more to micromanage, and I'm going to do it all. So what happens is we hire, and then we do to them as we do unto ourselves, right? I know it sounds biblical, right? But that's what happens. So if you have been doing this micromanaging of yourself, and then you get exasperated and you finally break down and you have some success and you outsource or you hire something, then all of a sudden you're micromanaging that person just like you micromanage yourself. So you see the problem? It's actually conditioned behavior. It's this frenetic-paced, micromanaged solopreneurship that we have as an agent until we finally get some help. And typically these days, a lot of people go and outsourcing overseas. I have a really big team of overseas, or when I say overseas, all over the place, all over the United States, Canada, all across Europe, Asia. My gosh, I'm trying to think. I mean, I have people really globally all over the place. And so the desire to micromanage them would be birthed out of all of the things that I did to myself. So imagine I'm sitting there and I'm trying to do all this social media. So here I am, and I film something, and now I have to download it, and I have to edit it, and I have to put in all the captions, and then I have to upload it to every single place. And so you micromanage yourself with all of that. So you just go out and say, I need somebody to take over all this. And you don't really even think about Well, what? Take over what? Well, I'm just going to find somebody who's savvy in social media. I'm just going to give it to them. So we abdicated away. And then all of a sudden we're looking at our social media platforms and things aren't looking the way that they should or the way we wanted them to. And the next thing you know, we're micromanaging somebody overseas on Upwork with nasty grams, nasty DMs, nasty messages, nasty Skypes, right? Because we're all frustrated. So it's a mess, isn't it? So this whole concept of micromanagement really is a conditioned behavioral response based on the way most of us start. So let's get into the solution. You need to start by building a system of best practices and then micromanage those details first. So let's just take a holistic approach, like I said, and let's get above marketing. Really, the front end of our business is some sense of marketing / lead generation. There are a lot of things it's referred to as, but in a holistic way, for me, it's strategic marketing. How am I going to let the world know that I am a realtor who has a way of helping a seller through a process and a buyer through? And that's actually how I developed a better marketing strategy by thinking, boy, instead of just saying, well, I'll help anybody, which is this weird bravado, and it's this desperado as well, I started to think, well, before I ever get in front of somebody, what does proper marketing look like? What's a proper marketing system look like? And that's where you learn about, I need a unique selling proposition, meaning I need to be able to tell the seller why they should do business with me above and beyond all of my competitors, including doing nothing at all. So that's an example of I mapped all that out. So that became first 7 bullet points for the seller, 6 for the buyer. Then it became an expression of each one of those bullet points. Then it became a full magazine style course that I built. And I had a system just like that. So instead of micromanaging myself to look at one seller, for example, and customize my conversation to that one seller's context, why they were selling, divorce, job movement, whatever, instead of just customizing towards that, I could start with a system. And I could say, look, I understand it's too bad you're getting divorced. The way that I start with all my sellers is I give them this package of information, which has the exact plan that I will customize for your property. I'm also going to start you off with 5 or 6 properties that sold around you so you can see how that's affecting you. And I'll give you a 1-page update of the marketplace. So every single person now is going to get that instead of me micromanage myself and trying to fit my context to their context, right? So it was just a best practices. And I mapped it all out and I put it together, and then it can be shared with anybody else that I hire. So at one point in time, I'm making all of these telephone calls to people that I would have met somewhere, an open house, a restaurant, a social sphere. In the beginning, I really didn't know a lot about lead generation when I first started in this business. So to me, it was the hustle. It was the grind. And it worked. I mean, to a large extent, I could find a real estate conversation anytime I went fishing for one. I mean, it's not really a hard subject to fall into. Right? Oh, hey, where are you from? Oh, the reason I'm asking, I'm in the real estate business. Oh, really? We were thinking about buying. Oh, really? You know, it was just so easy for me to think logically like that. But what I didn't do in the beginning, and I wish I had, was systematize everything from the start of a deal to the end of a deal. So, and really, you know, if you've watched me on the podcast before, I'm in my studio here, so it's easy to grab things and hold it up. But if you're just listening to the podcast on audio, I'm holding up a yellow legal pad. And that's really where I start to just dump A through Z. So I thought if I just walked from left to right, like a Henry Ford assembly line, I could see myself doing the marketing in a systematic way, doing telephones in a scripted, very precise way, doing the follow-up after somebody is accepting of the package, getting it out to them in a systematic way, having a follow-up script for those people, having a way that I would talk through a listing presentation precisely and systematically, having a way that I would onboard that listing, having a very particular way that we would follow up and book open houses and we would run those, get the feedback, and on it goes. So if you really just see it as one long system, and you just document each chunked up phase. I mean, don't go bananas trying to write every detail after every detail. Say phase 1, marketing. Phase 2, lead generation scripting. Phase 3, fulfillment of a package. Phase 4, presentation. Phase 5, right? Just chunk them up and start taking some notes. Now you can start to micromanage those chunks. And that's exactly what I did. And over time, it just became a system of best practices, really best practices. Because when you try to do everything on muscle and you're micromanaging yourself to death, that's not best practices. It never has been and it never will be. And quite frankly, your book of business will be in direct proportion to your energy, right? And that's why I say in the beginning that you want to turn your crazy job into a business. That's what this podcast is all about. That's what my coaching program is all about, because that's what I learned to do and save my life from being this mess of chaos. All this nonsense that this business steals your life, that's because nobody will sit still and stop micromanaging themselves to try to just hustle and muscle, and they just won't build something. When you build something, you have a lot of time. I do. I have enough time for a lot of different things in my life because I did it this way. And I actually really enjoy micromanaging the system. Now, here's the final point here. So now you've got the system, but you still need the people to run it. So imagine this beautiful assembly line. Each phase or each chunk is made, but now you really have to go and hire people. And then you have to, here's the fourth point, train people on the system. But instead of micromanaging their training, you empower them. This is what I learned, right? So let me explain this because it's a pretty simple philosophy. So for example, Laura, who has worked with me for 18 years, started at 23 years old and really knew nothing about business or anything. And when I first hired her, I put her on the phone as a telemarketer. And she had zero experience as a telemarketer, but I needed somebody. Here's micromanaged Danny needing somebody to take over calls for him because he doesn't have time because he's running around. And here, let's start here. Oh, let's find a script. And there's the script. Okay, let's just get some generic leads coming in. And it worked. You know, generic buyer leads coming in the door. We'd make a phone call. We'd set up an appointment. We could come and present to them. And the next thing you know, because nobody else was doing it, we had buyers and we were working with them. But it had nothing to do with sellers. And you need sellers. The whole business is predicated on sellers. And here I was not even thinking about that because I was just thinking about go. Micromanage yourself. You got to work. And that's the danger of the messages about the grind and the hustle. Okay, the grind and the hustle are certainly an awesome component. But against what? Against no system, you'll micromanage yourself to death or at least into a crappy lifestyle, and you'll never be able to hire somebody and clone that because they'll run away within the first weeks when you start micromanaging them. And I see that all the time. I'm still teaching top producers, don't do that when they come in, and in the first 2 weeks, telemarketer's gone. So as an example, when Laura was going through that, we refined it. But then what we realized is, well, wait a minute, why do we have you doing that when your strength is more client care? Once we get the clients, to manage them, to manage that listing and its onboarding, to manage the feedback. I mean, she's like savant-like at it. She's so gentle with our sellers that she's fabulous at it. So now all of a sudden we build out a client care system of exactly from the minute we say yes to the listing, telemarketing can pass it to her and she does A through Z. And we just keep beating on that system and evolving it into better practices. See, there's really no such thing as best practices because they can always be better. So we just keep tweaking the system. But because the system, with the right person trained on it and doing the right job because that's her skill set and she now gets the experience, there's zero reason for me to micromanage her. None. Because she now is empowered to run that division and runs it better than I would run it because my savant-like ability is in the field, face-to-face with people. So I follow best practices there. So I just become a tactician, but I am also the global strategist for all this, right? I know this sounds heavy to you if you're listening to it, but I'm telling you, this is exactly what works. So I implored you, if you're listening to this, go to thegriffin.co, look at my featured listings. This is how we do that. And we've really transformed our business over the last 10 years I was one place coaching and training, and then 10 years ago I started my own because I didn't like all the distressed sale buyer business. I thought something was off, and I developed a whole best practices for me. And I'm telling you, in the last 3 years, the acceleration is incredible because you really don't just go linearly better as you're making these distinctions. In the beginning, it feels a little clunky and you have to put your systems in place. And when I say systems, don't get freaked out by it. All you're doing is documenting what you do that works. You know who tells you what works? The consumer, not some guru. So keep that in mind too. So really now what's happening from multiple telemarketers to agents, to client care managers, to closing coordinators, all of these people are being micromanaged by the system, but they feel empowered by that kind of micromanagement, not beaten down. Okay, so let me summarize this. Like I said, micromanagement is probably killing you and your business. And the subject here was, what should you micromanage? And it's not the people, it's the systems. So the first point to understand is, take a self-awareness that we're all micromanaging ourselves and we're beating ourselves with all that micromanagement. Second point is we hire people typically after we've been micromanaging ourselves to get some relief. Then we actually do to them as we do unto ourselves, meaning you start micromanaging them because it's learned behavior. So stop in point number 3 and build a system of best practices and micromanage the details. Because a business does need to be micromanaged, but it's the details of the system. Fourth, then go find the people, hire the people, and train them on the system and make sure their skill set fits the section of your system that really works for them. And then by doing that, you will empower them and they will really start to hit stride with you, okay? I'll summarize it by saying it this way. When starting as a solo agent, in real estate, we tend not to realize that we're micromanaging ourselves in everything that we do. We tend to see what's right in front of us regarding the next sale, and we hardly ever take the time to see the entirety of the whole process. So, when we finally break down and we hire help, we immediately start to manage them like we did ourselves, and that usually fails and fails pretty quickly. So the solution is to build a system for all the steps in your business and then micromanage the steps of the system. Then you can go and hire and train on that system and empower people. And by the way, it's just a little bonus section here. That's how you create a killer culture, and I mean killer in a positive way, for your business. And a really good, solid brand that the consumer really senses something's very different and professional. All right, now remember, to help you do all this and organize it, you can take immediate action and get started in the right direction with our free simple business plan that's waiting at freeagentgift.com. You just go there. It's an easy digital course. There's a downloadable PDF. It'll give you the framework for how to begin to systematize your business because I've chunked up the sections for you. Also, don't forget, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We syndicate to most places that you'd probably be listening. And we also post this content, very importantly, on YouTube. So don't forget to subscribe to the Realty Classroom channel on YouTube. We'd love a subscribe over there because we're going to do more and more on YouTube. So head over there as well, the Realty Classroom. We'd also appreciate it, of course, if you know somebody that needs help in real estate. These are real actionable tips. I'm not just a coach that does this theoretically. I also run a brokerage. I also do my own book of business, and I'm able to pull it off. And I've enjoyed raising 5 kids with my wife. We have a great lifestyle, and it's all because of these things I learned. And I share them and I give them away because I want to find you, and I want to leave you in a better spot than I find you. And this is the best way that I can do it. So share this with somebody who needs it, okay? But remember this, nobody's coming for you. Nobody. So go get to work on your own business by yourself, and you'll see that we will be right here in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks again. Appreciate you listening. Much love.